This is an interview with Norman Thompson at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York, on 4th of September 2002, approximately 2 o'clock. Interviewer is Michael Russert. Name, date, and place of birth, please.
Norman E. Thompson, born August 23rd, 1925, at Glassport, Pennsylvania.
Okay, what was your pre-war education?
I was in high school whenever the war was declared, and joined the Marine Corps February 22nd of '43 while I was still in high school. And that June, I graduated, and then the Marine Corps sent me to Colgate University for a V-12 program.
What does that mean?
Well, it's an officer's training school, but I had conspired with another friend of mine that also joined the Marine Corps that we didn't want to go to school and we wanted to go to the war. So, because mother wouldn't sign the papers at age 17 for me to go into Marines unless I went into V-12, the officer's training program, which incidentally most of those guys got killed pretty quickly. But so after a semester of that, my marks were suitable for boot camp, and I was sent to San Diego, California, to go to boot camp.
Can I go back a second?
All right.
You were in high school when you heard about Pearl Harbor. What was your reaction to it, and where were you when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Okay, I was in Cambridge, New York, attending high school there, and the first thing I thought about was enlisting and going to war and enlisting the Marines, because my father had been a Marine, and we're pretty angry about that. And so that was, although it was a detour, I got there fast enough.
Okay, could you go back then to, you were saying about boot camp?
Most Marines from this area are sent to Parris Island, but for some reason I was sent out to San Diego and went through 14 weeks of training out there, 2 weeks of which were on the rifle range, and then after that time I was assigned to Camp Pendleton, which is in near vicinity to the Marine Corps at San Diego, for training and on field artillery, pack howitzers and 105s, and they had a 155 rifle there, which was supposed to be an artifact of times gone by, and he said you'll never see one of these in combat, so don't worry about training on it. So I stayed at Pendleton for some weeks and trained with I believe it was the 5th Division there, and they were staging and getting ready to go, and the night before they went, I was transferred into a motor transport department there at Pendleton, and subsequently a short time later I was sent out as a replacement for the Okinawa campaign, which had just started then. And I got on a attack transport with a lot of other Marines, and we had our first boat trip. It was a relatively old ship, and it was pretty well loaded with people. We did get to see Honolulu, I guess it was, through the porthole. That was the only breakout, and it was pretty hot, and most of us would go to the upper decks to sleep at night. Tough finding a place to sleep up there, and when we weren't sleeping up there, we were sleeping several decks down and in the hold, and where there were a series of bunks, maybe 8 bunks high. for people. And we stopped at Guam and unloaded at Guam. Were there a day or so, if I remember correctly, and then headed on to Okinawa. And there was quite a bit of activity around Okinawa because they had a bunch of other naval vessels there, and there were kamikaze airplanes around. They had been fairly effective in that area. So we were kind of anxious to get off that thing, that transport.
Did you witness any of these attacks?
Yeah, on other ships, but they didn't, we had no close calls that I remember. They took some pretty good tonnage there around the island during that campaign. And when it was our time, we moved above deck and to go ashore, and there were cargo nets over the side that you had to climb down to get into a landing craft. It was a little rough getting in those things, but we did, and we were anxious to get off that ship because they had an 8-inch gun right on the fantail there that was right over where we were down below decks. Every time they fire that gun, it sounded like we'd had a direct hit on us. So we were nervous to kind of get out of there and go on our way, and we did, and we had a pretty much a good luck landing. We had no resistance when we landed, and but we were loaded down with about 80 pounds of ammunition and ammunition and rifle, M1 rifle, and provisions, and we went ashore.
Now, were you in the first wave, or were you?
No, I was a replacement, along with other replacements.
How many days into after the D-Day?
Well, I'm trying to think. That's why I asked about. It could have maybe been 20 days, okay. Something like, I can't remember.
Yeah, we don't need
yeah.
Exactly.
But I went in as a replacement, and everybody was separated. Then went to different units, and I went to 3rd Corps Artillery, and they were long toms, 155 rifles. That's the biggest rifle the Marine Corps had, and the ones that had been pointed out as being very archaic at Camp Pendleton. So I got issued my mess gear, or some mess gear there, and I went to the chow line. It was very, very muddy because they had giant Caterpillar tractors that would pull these big guns around, and the mud was just about waist deep on it. And so I got my chow, and I'd already put my pack away, and there back where it was a little bit dry. And they assigned me to a gun, which I was walking up on, and I could hear the fire commands. At that time, I knew they were going to fire, you know. So, but that didn't bother me until it went off, and all that chow went right up in the air from the concussion of that monster. And of course, later on, I got so I could go to sleep by one. You know? But that's the first time I'd ever heard that gun, and it had a 95-pound, 155 millimeter projectile that weighed 95 pounds, and 2 big bags of powder that went in and back of it that were a little longer than I could reach, and they rammed in after the shell. And we used to have some targets that were set up, and we'd zeroed in on before, and then after the troops had gained sufficient yardage up in front of us, we'd move the guns, you know, and go toward the south end of the island. We were driving the Japs down there toward the main city of Naha, and the firing missions were interesting, and there were a lot of them. And one that
Could you describe?
yeah, one I can remember that was fairly spectacular was that a platoon of Japanese soldiers had come along and taken a break on our base point that we'd registered the battery in on. And the battery, with all the different guns and other artillery units, all got this same location to put 3 rounds, fire at will, just as, as fast as you could fire them. It was 3 rounds. And I remember when the last one of those rounds went off, it sounded like 4 freight trains going down there. And from what the air observer called back, he said not one of the rounds lit 15 yards one side or the other of that platoon. So, but we would have firing missions at night, and, during the daytime too, and mostly at night. It was a kind of a harassing fire, and observers down there would pick up targets for us, and we'd fire on those, and then move the guns up whenever we got some we get too far away. We did occasionally move a gun up to fire in some of the caves at a point blank range when they had Japs in there that they couldn't dislodge, so they, and that was kind of a spectacular thing because it might have been 75 yards away that that round was sent.
Now, what kind of shells did you use for something like that? Did you use canister or?
No, there were two kind of shells that we had. One of them was called smoke, and it did, when it hit, it looked like white smoke, but it was white phosphorus. It was phosphorus, very sticky stuff. And then we had HE, high explosive. So just those two, and they would we'd set the fuses to either burst on impact or just before impact with them. But they were fragmentation or fire, one of the two, and both kinds, emitted a lot of shrapnel. But we used a lot of them. The intensity, the battle changed the closer we got to Naha in the south end of the island, and there was a lot of ground fighting down there and a lot of casualties, and then because all the Japs had been bottled up down there. So after we secured the island, they moved me along with item battery to the north end of the island. There was a big road along the edge of the island. We moved. The island was about 80 miles long, and we went to the north end of the island. The war was not yet over. They hadn't dropped the bomb, and we were. I joined the 1st Marine Division at that time up there in their training camp, and we were training to go ashore on Okinawa, on Japan, the mainland, at that time, and we hadn't. It seems to me it had only been a couple of weeks we were up there whenever they dropped the atom bomb, and then we had a party.
And what was your reaction to hearing the news about the atomic bomb?
Well, the mood had been very dark before that time, because we knew what we were up against, that we'd seen enough of the Japanese to know that they were committed to save their homeland and win any battle they entered, and so we knew it was going to be a tough fight, and it was obvious, that their surrender was coincident with the effect of those two bombs. And all the Marines that I knew found all the whiskey and and started celebration for about 2 days and they shot everything in the world up in the air. You took your life in your hands if you were outside without your helmet. And we had a celebration, and a short time after that, time there is not, doesn't spring to my mind, but we were assigned to another troop transport and sent to China, to North China, to repatriate a Japanese regiment that had been in China all this time, the Yamane regiment. And we went in at the mouth of the Yangtze River, and that was at Tsingtao, and up the river, and landed at Tientsin, big Chinese city. And we billeted ourselves in the French arsenal, which was an old arsenal from times back, and were assigned more of a police duty than anything else I could describe, because that regiment had been there in Tientsin all through the war, and they were living off the Chinese and were fat, dumb, and happy, and just looked like they hadn't seen anything except to terrorize the Chinese, which they had done. And when the Marines came there, it changed. So we started shipping them back to Japan, but there was a little hazing on the way, before they ever got aboard anything to go. But Tientsin was a big city, and the Chinese, and you may remember seeing trains in China. They'd come into a station and they'd have Chinese piled on the top of the cars, and everything, every place you could imagine that was a place to put a foot, there'd be. And they would start filling the station, for maybe half a day, 2 days before the train left. And then there'd be a big rush on the station whenever the train came in there, and they would trample 2 or 3 old ladies and children and everything. It didn't matter. I mean, they'd get in the way of those chinks, and they'd be a stampede to get on the train. So we thought about that a little while, and we put some guys in there with BARs, and when they waiting on the train that came in, we shot the BARs over their head, and they almost disappeared. Just, I mean, instant order. And then we lined them up to go in, and we'd have 2 or 3 Marines on every line to see that they kept their place to get on the train. No more babies and old ladies were killed, but we didn't need those BARs, because we found out right quickly that we had these big long clubs, the spars out of a cot, and that you could slide them under a guy that broke in the line or something like that, and he'd lift himself up. I mean, they became weightless when you slipped that between their legs and lifted it. And we'd send them out into the crowd, and all the Chinese out there would say, "Oh, Ding Hao, that was wonderful." They loved that, see those slackers get ejected into the crowd again. So, but I had malaria when I got there, and came down with a jaundice. So I went into sick bay then, and I was ready to come home. You know, I was feeling pretty bad and everything, and all they could treat those ailments with Atabrin or vitamin pills. And so I made sure that the doctor skated down all my vitamin pills when he came up to my cot. And after a while he said, "You know, you're not getting any better. So I think we're going to have to send you back." So they put me on a transport. There were a lot of other hospitalized Marines on it. And we went back to San Diego. One thing I didn't mention, it was quite an experience. On our way to Okinawa in a Victory ship transport, which were really pretty flimsy ships, and they'd been through water a long time. We hit a big typhoon, and it had already hit Okinawa just after we had left, and it blew that island away. My brother was in the Army on Okinawa at that same time, and I never contacted him, but he told me what had happened on the island. And we caught that thing at sea, and it was an uncomfortable time, because you'd walk on the deck, and the wall would become the deck. You know? And of course things were falling down from the overhead, and waves broke over that thing. It was a miracle that it came through that sea. And but we tore some stuff up on deck, but as far as I know, we lost no people, and we got the Tsingtao all right on it. But that, with what I mentioned before, brings me back to the States. And at that time, they put me in a hospital, and I was there until I got a little bit better, and they sent me home for a furlough, like you usually get after you're overseas. And then after I had done that, seen my mother and other friends, I went to St. Albans Naval Hospital, because I still had problems with the jaundice. It had gone into other more serious problems. I spent a while in St. Albans, and then when I got better there, they transferred me to Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I reported for no duty, and after a while got discharged and sent back to Cambridge at that time, which was one of the summer months of 1945, I guess, 40. And it was discharged. That time, I went right back to Colgate University, where I'd spent my V12 experience. I neglected to tell you about a very important thing I did on Okinawa after the Okinawa campaign was over. I wrote a mud-stained letter back to Dean Case at Colgate University, and I can't remember the exact words, but I said, I know I wasn't a very good student. And I would be deeply appreciative if you could let me back in whenever I come back. So I went, I checked and found out that I could go back, and I did. And
did you make use of the GI Bill?
Went on to, actually I made use of what they call Public Law 16. It was if you had a disability, you came out of the years with a disability, you could go on, and it was a little more money, you know, and so I went on that instead of the GI Bill, and it paid for my books and tuition, and I'm very thankful for it, because it was a bad time to be paying your way through college. And I didn't stop for any summer vacations. I just went right on through, and I graduated in the winter of 1949. In mid-term, I got out because I'd gone during the summer sessions. I came back to Cambridge, and the head of my department was angry with me about not going on. He had a fellowship for me down at Hofstra University, head of the geological department at Colgate, and he was angry with me because I didn't take it up, but I'd scouted the market in the oil business down in Texas about jobs, and there weren't any more, or very few. So I read the Albany paper and found a guy that needed a truck delivered to Lubbock. So I took his truck and drove it to Lubbock, and then hitched a ride into to Dallas and circulated around oil companies to see what I could turn up in the way of a job. And I found a job with Seaboard Oil Company, and it's a small independent company, very good one. And they obligingly paid me $285 a month to be a geologist for them. And I was just tickled to death because I think it was the last job in Dallas. We're buying oil from the Arabs at about $1.45 a barrel, and so the independents and companies in the United States their budgets were restricted. And I stayed with Seaboard for about 3 years, and was sent to Corpus Christi, Texas as a district geologist down there, and I went to work for another company, the Lion Oil Company, which was merged into Monsanto as their district geologist. Worked for them 2 or 3 years, and I worked for another small company for a while, and then went on my own in 1958 and formed my own company, and it was a one-man operation, but essentially looking for oil prospects and mapping and then acquiring the leases and taking the prospect to the oil industry, to different companies, and selling them interest in it. And it was a very very interesting business, and the business got better, and so that pretty much brings me to here. I had an office down there for 30 years in Corpus Christi, and met everybody there and had a good time. It's a good. So if I had to quit right now, I could say that I had a good life. And,
I noticed you mentioned in here you suffered a hearing loss.
yes, yeah, I did. We had a little, on that artillery, 155 had the same muzzle velocity as an M1 rifle, and only it was 95 pounds of powder in it, so it was pretty tough on the ears. And I complained about that to them when I got out, the doctor, and he said, oh, they didn't have anything for measuring what your hearing loss was. And it stayed about the same. I get a lot of static about it, and I did get a pair of hearing aids about 4 years ago, and they were pretty expensive, about $2,000 a year, an ear, and I found out that I could really hear better without them. So I'm not too poorly equipped. I could have been a lot worse, and evidently it didn't change much through the year, but they ring constantly.
Did you ever join a veterans organization?
Yes, I joined the Captain Maxon post at Cambridge, New York, and I've been a current member and am a current member. However, I spend most of my time in San Antonio, so I can't be too active in the cave. But while I'm here in the summer, I am.
Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Well,
you said you had a friend you went in service?
Yeah, Earl Costello from Cambridge. We were both in high school together in the same class, and we were buddies. And we decided we'd join together and go in the Marines. And Earl subsequently was sent to Hawaii, and he was in the Marine Air Corps. He did duty there, and we never did hooked back up until after we'd gotten home. And he came through unscathed and in good spirits. And he is presently living there, and he's retired from duty with the state government. He was a county commissioner up there in Granville for years, and is now retired. Has one son.
Did you stay in contact with anyone else?
No, when I got out of boot camp, we pretty much went in different directions because there was the platoon, and then I had made a couple of acquaintances there with the division when I got transferred out of that into. I was a moving target then, and I didn't really have much opportunity to get acquainted with other outfits. I knew the members of my gun crew, you know, and that was about it. But we were all pretty busy. We didn't have many cocktail parties, so I, from then on out, I met guys, but they're a blur to me now, you know.
Did you ever attend or think of attending any reunions?
I've looked at them occasionally in the Legion magazine, and I never have attended one. Never have. I met some of the boys back at Colgate, but most of the ones that I saw there that became second lieutenants never made it back. But there were a few at Colgate that went back there.
How do you think your military service affected or changed your life?
It changed it drastically because I was pretty lighthearted and through high school and not very serious about things. I was a mediocre student. And the Marine Corps experience and the war experience turned me around, and it precipitated that letter that I wrote to Dean Case, and also my academic ability improved considerably at college. So I got serious about things, and that's all I can tell you about that.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Got it?
Yes.
How long did we talk?